Alan, another of the things you did in your remarkable career was play a role as an advisor to the six-party talks on Korea, North Korean denuclearization specifically. Here we are, dealing with the same basket of issues. And I want to ask you, after the breakdown of the Hanoi summit, first, whether President Trump overreached in this very personal diplomacy. Second, what's next? What would you, as a sensible, experienced advisor, tell these folks they ought to be doing next? And then I'll just tack on one more question. If you were Prime Minister Abe in Japan, looking at this situation, wouldn't you think Japan needs a nuclear deterrent of its own?
Well, let me applaud the president for having the courage to speak directly to Kim Jong-un. Now, there will be those who say that he has legitimized this horrendous totalitarian regime. It is a horrendous totalitarian regime. But having been an observer to the six-party talks, where 6 countries came together with an earnest desire to try to find our way out of this wilderness, this nuclear wilderness, it did not pan out. This president was handed a very difficult security environment in Northeast Asia, and in particular, excuse me, as Kim Jong-un, I think ultimately has demonstrated that he has actually achieved a strategic nuclear deterrent. In other words, an ICBM that can reach the United States, the continental United States. He appears to have not just been able to miniaturize his nuclear devices into a warhead, he's been able to mate it, which is the physics associated with that are quite daunting. And our intelligence community has said that he has multiple warheads. So no other president prior to this one has been confronted with the reality that this regime could, in fact, if this is a suicidal regime, and it's never quite clear what their final outcome might be in a real pinch, this regime can reach the continental United States. So to an extent, I applaud the president in doing this. What I think has not been helpful has been this rhetoric. First of all, the rhetoric that really brought us, I think, to the brink of the potential for conflict in Northeast Asia. And then a rhetoric in the aftermath of the first summit, which produced a pretty hollow joint statement, none of which has come to pass, but rhetoric that in essence said, I have solved the nuclear deterrent. There is no North Korean nuclear threat any longer. And what that's done is, in fact, it depressurized those who were engaged in the maximum pressure strategy with regards to sanctions and North Korea, which had, I think, a substantial reason, was a substantial factor in their coming to the table. So we depressurized that, and the Chinese, to some extent, walked back. Then the rhetoric for the Hanoi summit, where we have fallen in love with Kim Jong-un, I think inflated expectations in many respects for an outcome which was quite disappointing. And, again, if the president didn't get what he wanted, not permitting Kim Jong-un to dictate an outcome, I think was wise. But the question needs to be, what are we doing behind the scenes with our experts to set the conditions for a summit where we have, as leaders arrive, real expectations for outcomes? Showing up and having meetings with no real expectations for outcomes leaves you at a point where